can you state your name?
Benjamin Eliyahu Ben Michal.
Okay. And can you spell that?
B as in boy, E as in Edward, N as in Nancy, Y as in yellow, A as in apple, M as in Mary, I as in igloo, N as in Nancy. B as in boy, E as in Edward, N as in Nancy, hyphen, M as in Mary, I as in igloo, C as in cat, H as in hotel, A as in apple, E as in Edward, I as in igloo, L as in Lucy. Eliyahu, I left out.
That's
E
fine.
as in Edward, L as in Lucy, I as in igloo, Y as in yellow, A as in apple, H as in Harry, U as in useless.
Can you tell us what your relationship was to the victim in this case?
The victim was my daughter,
Okay.
Hannah Nicole, driver Ben Michael.
Okay. All right. And Mr. Benjamin, I want you to, or Mr. Ben Michael, I want you to tell the judge about what Hannah was like in life.
645 days ago, I had the most beautiful living daughter on Monday, the 5th of December, 2020. She was dressed in a tiny, prescient little pea coat that was also colored pea, curry yellow. We were at a rest stop in McDowell, North Carolina, and I brought her toward her favorite thing, the arbors, in the middle of the rest stop where the grass was green, and the trees were tall and the roots were old and ripped up. I like to call her Naima, which means pleasantness, and she was pleasant to all she came and encountered. The most pleasant.
What was her disposition and demeanor like?
While we stood at that tree, she counted every layer of the roots. She was 13 months old. She had had a penchant for trees since she was a month and a half year old. She was sweet. There are babies that are planned. We know what the opposite of that is. But then there are babies that are planned. This child was deliberate, intentional, and the mental work of 2.5+ years prior to her 9.5 months in utero and her entrance into this world. There are a very special sister with 3 babies. And by the last one, Eliana, we came up with a term. There are forward-facing babies and not forward-facing babies. I have an older daughter who's estranged, you've heard about here, named Eiley. She was not a forward-facing baby. Eiley cared about mommy and daddy. You put her head in your armpit and you were wherever you were, and that was not Hannah Nicole. Hannah Nicole was a forward-facing baby, meaning when you carried the baby, she needed to see everybody and smile at them, everybody in the room, as if she almost had an innate nature of knowing that she had very limited time. She had to see everything, and she'd get really, she'd let you know that she needed to be turned around if you were not holding her face forward-facing babies. My sister's little Eliana was like that. I learned to hold her that way. She wanted to be taken around. She wanted to count everything. And she was looking at those roots that day in her little coat, and she had her little curls that came over her hair. And that's my last really strong, close memory of holding my daughter, playing in those roots of those trees. Her disposition was just the sweetest baby. And I'm not saying that as biased dad. I've been around a lot of children. She was different. It's like she was hosting everybody she met. We would run. I wanted to bring the little Legos. We would run. We would play. By the time she was 13 months old, she had a real thing for little cars. We'd chase them around the room together. I'd crawl with her. Beautiful. She was really weird looking. And some babies have this and some babies don't. Between like 4 months and 7 months, they're like growing. Some things are growing too fast. Some things are growing too slow. But by 13 months old, she was so beautiful.
Did you provide photographs that you'd like to see?
I would like to, please. Yes, Katie.
See you, Hannah?
Please.
Your Honor,
Please, the court.
I'm going to publish the photographs that...
This is me and Hannah together.
And approximately
About a few months. This is at a really beautiful, inexpensive hotel room in Clinton, Connecticut, and they have massive floor space for a hotel room like this. And we were chasing those little cars around all day, these little rev-up cars. So this would be the second week of August of 2020 when we were down with my family, as will be depicted more clearly in better photos coming. And my brother-in-law, Nathaniel Lewis, and my sister and her 3 children were all here meeting their cousin. This is in May of 2020. This is the quartz sand of Siesta Key, Sarasota. And we were spending a lot of time there. We were spending time at Nokomis, in Venice Beach, the adjacent smaller beaches, and we would come in her wagon. And you can see what she's doing. See, she's not a passive baby. She would grab the handle of the wagon and look at me like it was the most fun thing to get and smile at Daddy at Dover, just to smile into my eyes and say, look, I'm leading the wagon. She'd do it every day. She'd take hold of the handle and say, I steer this. This is my wagon. And this is in Clinton, Connecticut again. And you can see, if you want to see her nature, that's her nature. That's her nature.
Is she a happy baby?
She was excited and happy and engaging, and she'd come up to you and want to just learn everything. She'd want to touch you and smile. She'd want to get inside you and let you know that you should be happy too. Grandma threw a tennis ball a little too fast. What? Yeah, that's a picture from a little bit of the weirder period, where some of the eyes are growing, things are growing a little too fast and out of line. And I know this is the preferred thumbnail for the court, but since she was looking a little silly, so that was probably back at about April of 2020. This is my parents' living room, where she would come up to this piano over here, and she had a knack, and she would start. I'd be playing piano. I've been playing piano since I was 3 years old, and I would ensconce her and encompass her in all my music, and she would come in the middle, near the middle C, and she would start doing things that actually made sense. And then she'd look at you, and she'd show you she could have a beat. My older daughter, Eiley, has an immense amount of musical talent, but she could never keep a beat, but she would come up with things. But Naima, Hannah Nicole, she could tell where the beat was. She knew where the beat of life was. She knew where to enter the room. She knew where to look at you. She knew where the camera was. No, these are very little cars that you'd pull and they'd zoom around the room. This is actually a toy that I had going back to when I was a child, and it has a revolver inside, like a revolving scoop, and it goes around, and it's funny, it like collects toys into its dump truck. This is a xylophone that was my sister's over here. Little cup. She rode that little Pumobile behind her everywhere in my parents' house, and she was amazing because sometimes, as a mother, you wanted to sleep a little bit more. Chloe would go over, and she would open the bedroom door and lay back down, and she'd thunder down the hallway. She'd just crawl down because we had this whole area on the second floor, safe, the dogs in the kitchen, the stairs over here blocked, and she had this living room up the hallway to the bedrooms, and you'd hear her. My mom still imagines the beauty of her grandchild thundering down the hallway, crawling thunderously. She'd come and she'd play, and my Eiley couldn't leave her for 3 minutes, even when she was 12, 11 months old. Constant attention. Not Hannah Nicole. Hannah Nicole, she got in the living room with her stuff. She'd make a story. You could leave her playing there for 20 minutes. She'd make up a world. She'd put the dolls. She had things at 11 months old, 13 months old. She'd be piling cars. She'd be making a whole story and happily playing. And somebody comes, smile, go over, pet the dogs. This was her world. Everything here, Grandma made the entire house her world. That's why we were there.
Sir, the purpose of this hearing today is to give the court an understanding of sort of the impact of the actions of
Nobody can weigh the potential of the impact. When you lose Grandma and you lose Grandpa and you were not estranged, you have a life, a rich life lived. You have memories. It's painful. It's a natural process and cycle of life. When you lose a baby, when somebody entitles themselves by whatever precipitation, you can get into the moral philosophy if it is okay or not okay. Do you own your life? Can you take your life? But when you entitle yourself by whatever precipitations, by whatever precipitated your mind without getting into the weeds, to decide you are entitled to take somebody else's life based on your opinion of whatever kind of mental illness, lack of mental illness, acting, pretending you're in mental illness, overlaying, masking, it doesn't matter. There is no wiggle room where you are entitled to take somebody else's life because of your impression or opinion. They are there to live life and discover what life is for themselves. The impact of losing Hannah Nicole, driver Ben Michael, cannot be measured. We sat around in the waves of some luxurious beach somewhere for 2.5 years, speaking tenderly to each other, dreaming our daughter. Before she was born, buying her the highest level, best things, doting on her. Nobody knows. Deanna doesn't know. Jeff doesn't know. Your Honor, you don't know. Nobody knows. She could have grown up and given humanity cures to things we don't even have diseases for yet. How can you measure the potential? How can you look at a father and say, the image I have of a 5-year-old, of a kindergartner, I lost the potential, I lost the view. The most unplanned child, to the most unprepared parents, is a travesty and a tragedy of the highest order that the parents may never be able to even articulate the pain and loss of. Now you're talking about a baby who was not just planned, but planned. A baby who was meant to put their best foot forward. A baby who was taught to have a moral and cultural consciousness that would give to humanity whatever she could possibly find as her niche and knack in the world. To measure the impact and loss privately, I'm a very hard individual. I've lived a very particular life in countries that are not here to get knowledge and find things. I'm not a good model for initial reactions. In other words, I'm extremely stoic. That doesn't mean there wasn't 13 months after, and every private moment when I screeched like a frightened 7-year-old girl, where I sat for 3 months in a van just screaming and screaming and screaming that this woman believed that she was entitled to take my daughter's life out of this world because she stopped believing in having a moral consciousness and the duty to help humanity, because she believed the girls who were with us, not that she didn't believe in polygyny, she didn't believe in the girls who were with us. She believed they were reprobate, second class. She believed she put in more energy and people did not reciprocate to her, and she quit around June 3rd, 2020, and planned Hannah's death because she planned to exit the world and take her daughter with her. She may have even abused her and felt that there was some issue on a phone call between taking the girls to Connecticut when she said, if you don't get your ass back down here to the South as quickly as you possibly can, I will throw this baby on the floor because I'm tired of her screaming and I can't get her to go to sleep the way you do, which was a beautiful segue that I love spending time with my daughter, putting her to sleep. It was like my job to put her against my heart. We spent lots of time rocking and going into sleep, and Chloe just had triggers from being raped and abused as a child, suffocated and jumped on by a drunken Eric driver who caused her to be triggered by sleep, and she doesn't even know it herself. I apologize. I'm very emotional.
I understand, but the purpose of this hearing is about Hannah and the loss of Hannah and the impact.
And this is the impact on me.
Can you tell the court whether you have any feelings with regard to punishment or sentencing?
Nothing that actually happened to her would ever change her. I don't know that no sentence, maximum sentence, could ever get through to her in a way that she won't build a new identity, a new mask, change who she is, manipulate the next party. Chloe Alexis Driver wasn't a victim. She had the most power in our group. It was called her fits. I don't know what kind of a sentence would help her. I mean, the inclination to say death penalty, maximum. She believed she could take the life of a baby out of this world, a baby, any baby, and this beautiful baby who had this much potential to help the world, an impact that can't be weighed. Nearly unlimited potential. Can we see the others?
Photos?
Yeah. There's a whole nother email with the ones with the family.
These are the ones that I have.
She didn't send that.
All right. Your Honor, I have nothing further.
Mr. Hathaway.
I have no questions of this witness. You can sit down.
Thank you.
All right, Chloe, for the first thing I'm going to have you do is I'm going to have you raise your right hand Do you swear the information and testimony you're about to give this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Okay, you're going to have to speak up. I know that you're fairly soft-spoken, so were you able to get that? Okay. All right, go ahead.
I appreciate the opportunity to be heard during this whole process. I am terribly sorry for many things in my life, but most of all for who was lost, and I always will be. Every single day I live with my guilt. I have drowned in sorrow and regret with such an acute awareness of it for so long, I never imagined there would be anything more than that for me. Quite frankly, I didn't believe I deserved anything more than just that. In the past, I genuinely believed I had to die every day for my daughter, to hate myself for my failure in protecting her. But I know now that life goes on whether I suffer or not, so I need to stop taking from it. I know now that I must live for my daughter instead and do the best I can to be kind and loving and giving, because that's exactly what being with Hannah taught me. I see her everywhere, in everything. She lives on and shows me that beauty can be found anywhere, even where I'm going, because I can feel her in my tears. I feel her in my friend's embrace. I see her in a stranger's kindness, in someone's undiluted joy at seeing their loved one. I hear her in people's laughter, and I know her most of all in my family's loyal love for me, even still. No matter how bad our losses, life can be good again, and this is not my end. I accept my punishment with peace, and I want it to be known for every person that has prayed for me, that our Father has heard you, and I have been given a contentment that the world cannot take away. My daughter's memory rests now, so I am able to as well. I want it to be said that no one ever plans to lose control of their own mind. This trial was only a snapshot of my life and mind. It's easy to review the past and say what could have been done differently. It's even easier to say what someone should have done. But that's just it. In the midst of a terrifying situation, you can't actually think. The horror and fear you feel clouds your thinking abilities and disconnects you from reality. So though I may not legally meet the definition of insanity as of today, I know in the bottom of my heart that I was, because I never would have done what I did had it not been for my decompensation. In the end, we can't go back and undo the bad, no matter how much we want to, but we can learn from it and prevent it from happening again. I will continue to seek help for my mental illness because of this. I read once that suffering is cheap as clay and twice as common. What matters, though, is what each man makes of it, and I promise I will make the best of whatever you give me, Your Honor. Thank you.
Yeah, y'all stay. Yes. I have continued to think about this case after the verdict, as I am sure all of us have. I have been aware that based on the law, that my only real discretion in this case is whether to sentence you to life without parole or life with the possibility of parole. I am aware, as Ms. Trethewey pointed out, that the parole eligibility in this state would dictate that you would serve 30 years of a life sentence before you were considered for parole. This was a heinous offense with evidence that was so graphic and traumatic that I began to do research on what kind of support and help we could give the jurors who were having to consider it. A parent killing a child is something that just offends us on the deepest level. It is a wrong that just is unfathomable. It just cannot be understood. And it scares us because it is so contrary to just fundamental moral behavior and what we expect of the bonds between human beings. And I have all those thoughts. I have had all those thoughts in this case. I noticed throughout the trial and considered it as part of the tragedy, quite honestly, that there were really no family members here to support you, and that Mr. Ben Michael was not here interested in the outcome of what was going to happen to his child, the person who killed his child. That was a very interesting dynamic to me. So I'm glad to see him here today. You don't need to speak to me at this point, sir. Your opportunity to speak has come and gone. Although the response I just heard doesn't do anything to make the whole situation any less tragic. But as I said, I'm glad to have heard from Mr. Ben Michael and to honestly try to give him some benefit of the doubt, understanding that there is an impact on him that cannot be measured, as he put it, and just again an impact on the universe. One more child who never goes to school, never gets to have a boyfriend or go to the prom, never gets to decide what a career is. They're not words to talk about what a terrible thing it is. But I do also feel bound to consider the fact that if you had succeeded, we would not have been here. We would have read about a tragic, inexplicable murder-suicide. I have to take into account that 3 different psychologists testified as to your profound mental illness, the depths of your sickness, your illness. I have to take into account the fact that the jury found you guilty but mentally ill, because they obviously were aware they had the choice of imposing a different sentence. Different verdict, I'm sorry, a verdict of guilty that did not reference any of your mental illness. Georgia law, Georgia statute means that the guilty but mentally ill verdict gives the Department of Corrections some direction and some ability to continue to provide treatment for you, but that is in their discretion. There's no black and white law as to how a judge is to consider that verdict. I will note that the jury found that you did not meet the criteria of not guilty by reason of insanity. The law in Georgia has been the same for about 200 years now. Whether or not that ever changes because of changes in medical and societal understanding of mental illness and how to treat it, I do not know. The intersection between law and medicine can be, well, it does not always mesh well. Things evolve. We now have treatment courts for people with mental illness and addiction, substance use issues, and the law and the courts slowly come about in proper cases to figure out about treatment. I don't quarrel with the jury's verdict. I don't impose this sentence out of sympathy. But I do think under everything that I heard, the sentence needs to take into account the possibility that in 30 years there may be different treatment modalities, different recommendations, different possibilities for your rehabilitation. I think the notion that you are cured because you're taking medication regularly now is something that I don't accept. I believe everyone acknowledges that, or at least based on the law and the testimony we heard in this case, that borderline personality disorder, for example, is a deep sickness that is not treated just by medication, for example. You were treated in order for you to gain competency to be able to actually go to trial. I don't think anybody who's dealt with anybody with mental illness is naive enough to suggest that you're cured. And I know I don't mean that as a criticism or a punishment. It's just reality. You did a horrible thing. But based on the evidence at trial and based on particularly the mental health testimony, the court will impose the following sentence as to count 1, malice, murder, life in prison with the possibility of parole. Count 2 and count 3 are vacated as a matter of law in that you cannot be sentenced to more than one murder count when there is only one victim. Count 4 merges into count 1. I agree with the state that count 5 does not merge into count 1 as it contains a different element, that is that the victim is a child under the age of 18. That is not an element of malice murder specifically. So as to count 5, the court imposes a sentence of 20 years to serve in the state prison system concurrent with count 1. You have a right to appeal this conviction. You have a right to file a motion for new trial, requesting other post-judgment relief. You must file any such notice of appeal or motion for new trial within 30 days of sentencing. You are entitled to have a lawyer represent you, and if you cannot afford to hire one will be appointed to represent you. I know Ms. Trethaway and Mr. Kessler are familiar with the procedures of our Indigent Defense Office as to how new counsel would be appointed to represent you moving forward. I would request that that counsel, if you will remain with us, and we will keep Ms. Driver, we can keep her here to get the sentence prepared, reviewed, signed, and get that taken care of before Ms. Driver is taken away from the jail or the holding cell. Yes. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you.